The stories we're following at this hour, President Park Geun-hye calls on global leaders gathered at the UN Climate Summit to view the issue in a different light while promising more support from Korea. The top diplomats of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan discussed the seriousness of human rights violations in North Korea. Seoul's foreign minister proposes dialogue with Pyongyang. And we have the highlights of Day 5 of Asia's biggest sporting competition underway in Incheon. These and more stories coming right up on Early Edition at 6. Good evening and welcome to Early Edition at 6. It's Wednesday, September 24th here in Korea, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Na-hyun Kyung.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us.
Let's begin with President Park Geun-hye's address to more than 100 world leaders at the UN Climate Summit in New York.
Right, there the president suggested perhaps viewing the issue in a different light before promising more input from Korea.
Choi Yoo-sun starts us off.
President Park Geun-hye has called on the international community to face up to one of the greatest challenges of our time, climate change. Addressing the UN Climate Summit, a high-level gathering to catalyze a global action plan on curbing carbon emissions by next year, the Korean president said the world should consider climate action as an opportunity, not a burden.
How we view the climate agenda as a boon or bane will bring huge differences. Investing in the chance to unlock new energy industries and jobs can ignite fresh engines of future growth.
President Park said her government is seeking to nurture new energy industries in dealing with climate change, such as energy storage systems for non-stop supply, zero-energy buildings, and self-sufficient eco-friendly towns. To encourage the private sector to innovate in reducing emissions, the president said the market should reward them for their work. For everyone to participate in the global campaign, President Park said the developed world must assist their developing counterparts by sharing the required technology and know-how.
All countries need to do their share if we are to limit global warming to 2 degrees by this century's end. Korea will work to submit next year our plan to support the post-2020 climate regime.
The Korean leader then said Seoul will contribute up to $100 million to the Korea-based Green Climate Fund, established to aid the developing nations on top of the $50 million it's currently paying. Pledging to share Korea's own knowledge and experiences internationally, President Park announced her country will become the first in Asia to implement an emission trading scheme next year. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News, New York.
And the heads of states from around the world agreed with her message. Leaders, including U.S. President Barack Obama, highlighted the need to start dealing with the issue now rather than later. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
With the threat of Islamic State militants and the spread of Ebola in West Africa competing for attention, the United Nations is also setting its sights on climate change. The UN has given 125 countries and their representatives at the General Assembly a platform to explain their plans to address the problem. U.S. President Barack Obama stressed the need for emerging economies to make stronger commitments and move past the rich-poor divide that has created a barrier in UN negotiations.
And today I call on all countries to join us, not next year or the year after that, but right now. Because no nation can meet this global threat alone.
Before taking the podium, Obama met with China's Vice Premier Zhang Gaoli. The two agreed that both of their countries need to take more responsibility in the fight against climate change, as they represent the world's 2 biggest greenhouse gas emitters. Zhang said China would aim to cap emissions as soon as possible. British Prime Minister David Cameron said his country is aiming to cut down greenhouse emissions by 80% by the year 2050 and to push the European Union to target a 40% reduction by 2030. French President François Hollande said his country will inject $1 billion into the Green Climate Fund. Most other leaders did not disclose specific plans, choosing instead to unveil them closer to the start of the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris in December of 2015. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And taking place on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly was a meeting over North Korea's human rights violations. Officials from Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo pointed to the atrocious abuses taking place under the regime and urged Pyongyang to close down prison camps. Here's our Hwang Ji-hye with more.
The UN Commission of Inquiry says North Korea uses prison camps, systematic oppression, and arbitrary executions against its own citizens, practices that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says hold no place in the 21st century.
So we say to the North Korean government, all of us here today, you should close those camps. You should shut this evil system down.
Kerry hosted the first ever ministers' meeting on North Korean human rights Tuesday to draw attention to the findings of a UN report released in February. It estimates that some 120,000 political prisoners are currently being held in 4 major labor camps, where starvation, torture, and forced abortions are rampant. South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se hopes for further progress on the issue.
Later this year, I look forward to the General Assembly adopting a more robust resolution on this issue, including measures on accountability.
Yoon proposed discussing the issue with the North, an offer that will likely be rejected. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un claims his people enjoy the world's most advantageous human rights system, but the diplomatic pressure on Pyongyang is mounting.
Japan is determined to play an active role to ensure that these efforts will lead North Korea to take concrete action toward resolving human rights abuses in North Korea.
Human rights watchers say coordination with Pyongyang's chief ally China is needed to some extent, which remains a challenge. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
And many North Koreans are reportedly suffering from a lack of the most basic necessities, especially food. The World Food Program says 250 grams was the average daily portion of food distributed to the people in the north last month. That's the lowest amount provided in 3 years, and it's not even half the amount North Korean authorities have set as a goal, which is about 600 grams. The WFP says this month's daily food ration is similar to last month, adding that the food shortage is due to a drought from the spring.
According to U.S. military leaders, the first round of airstrikes on Islamic State targets in Syria is only the beginning. President Obama says the support given by at least 5 Arab nations in those airstrikes proves that the world is committed to destroying the terrorist threat. Our Connie Kim has more.
Speaking out after the first airstrikes against Islamic State militants in Syria, U.S. President Barack Obama said that Washington was proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with its Arab allies. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Bahrain, and Qatar have partnered up with Washington for the first time since the first Gulf War in 1991 to counter the growing threat.
Well, it is a wonderful opportunity for me to welcome these leaders, friends, partners from the region, and to say thank you to all of them for their participation and commitment to rolling back the violent extremism that has so disrupted Iraq and Syria and threatens the region as a whole.
More than 200 airstrikes were launched against a dozen targets in the offensive, much of it in or around the Islamic State's self-declared capital of Raqqa. Activists on the ground said some 70 IS militants and 50 al-Qaeda-linked fighters were killed in the first set of strikes Tuesday. The offensive in Syria is an expansion of a campaign that began in Iraq last month. Prior to the airstrikes on IS targets, the U.S. launched separate airstrikes on a group of senior al-Qaeda officials known as the Khorasan Group in Syria. U.S. officials say they were plotting attacks against the West and had established a safe haven west of the city of Aleppo. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A new report by a U.S. health agency shows the number of Ebola cases could dramatically soar in the coming months, up to 1.4 million in Liberia and Sierra Leone alone. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said the estimate is partly based on the premise that Ebola cases are vastly underreported. It believes there could be up to 21,000 reported and unreported cases in those two countries by the end of this month. The World Health Organization believes there could be over 5,800 infections and over 2,800 deaths in West Africa.
A one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Na Hyung-kyung and Daniel Che.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
It is no longer unusual for Koreans to look for jobs after retirement for economic reasons, but finding a job in your golden years is no easy task. That's perhaps why the government is trying to lend a helping hand. Hwang Ji-hye tells us more.
The elderly line up for a job fair. They're people who are approaching retirement or already have but are seeking employment again.
I'm very confident in human resources and financial affairs. Managerial positions would be preferable, but I can also be a hands-on worker or anything else.
Yi is one of many Korean salary workers who are forced into retirement in their mid-50s and then struggle to eke out a living for the next 2 or 3 decades. To help remove the uncertainties post-retirement, the Korean government on Wednesday unveiled a package it believes will eventually help boost much-needed domestic spending. The package is aimed at lengthening the employment of salary workers. One way to achieve the goal is limiting wage gains for older employees.
We will expand subsidies for companies that introduce a wage peak system.
The government will also provide career designing services for people over 50. To encourage companies to introduce such schemes, the government will offer subsidies of about $1,000 for each employee who takes such vocational training run by their employers. The finance ministry says many retirees have had to set up restaurants or mom-and-pop stores with their life savings to make sure they have a steady flow of income. But many end up facing bankruptcy due to intense competition, with nearly 2/3 of such businesses failing within 3 years. The hardships of retirees have often been blamed for the delayed recovery in domestic spending, and the government hopes the new programs will help end the chronic problem. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Nearly $60 billion has been wiped off the market value of Samsung Electronics since January last year, with the company's stock prices recently at a 2-year low. Based on their closing price on Wednesday, the Korea Exchange says the market value stands at some $163 billion. That's down from January of 2013 when Samsung's stock hit an all-time high. The stock price hovered at around the $1,100 level on Wednesday, the lowest this year. Analysts say a lower profit forecast for Samsung in the third quarter, coupled with the company's excessive inventory, have turned investors off. Nonetheless, the Korean tech giant is pinning new hopes on the release of its new Galaxy Note 4. Analysts say, though, the success of its newest gadget alone will not get the company back on its feet. Kwon So-ah has more.
The Galaxy Note 4, Samsung Electronics' new widescreen smartphone with advanced functions like a better developed S Pen for note-taking and drawing, will hit store shelves on Friday here in Korea amid high expectations. The company's head of sales and marketing, Lee Don-ju, says the goal is to sell more of the smartphone than its predecessor. The high expectations are partly born out of necessity, as Samsung Electronics has seen its value slip in recent months.
It won't be easy to overcome the difficulties for the time being. The release of one product is not going to help Samsung turn around in the short term.
This is due to the fiercer competition in the smartphone market. Its biggest rival, Apple, sold a record-breaking 10 million of its new iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus models in the first 3 days of sales.
Well, the speculation out there is that Apple's preparing to sell between 770 and 80 million iPhones this holiday season, and this would be up from 50 to 60 million in the prior holiday season.
China's Xiaomi has also emerged as a threat. The company sold more smartphones in China than Samsung in the second quarter of the year. To counter, Samsung is employing a new strategy. They'll release the Galaxy Note 4 in China before the end of the month and before any other overseas market, which represents a first for Samsung. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
The Korean government is looking into giving domestic manufacturers a few more reasons to bring their overseas plants back home. The Trade Ministry says it will submit a revision to the law on the country's free trade zones that allows easier access to companies returning to Korea. Korea currently has 13 designated free trade zones, which provide firms various benefits such as tax breaks. About 60 local companies have reportedly agreed to bring their production facilities back since 2012, while a dozen others are committed to doing the same over the next 4 years. Well, there was and still is strong opposition from some doctors and civic groups, but the government is pushing ahead with telemedical services this month, as originally planned. To see whether the system could be effective, first, a pilot program to test the waters is launched. Our Kim Ji-hye has this report.
This patient has been suffering from high blood pressure for 15 years now and requires continuous medical examinations and care. But instead of visiting the hospital every day, he sends his health-related data, such as blood pressure and body composition, from his personal computer at home. Then the patient calls his doctor for one-on-one treatment.
마지막으로 병원 다녀오신 지는 언제세요?
한 일주일이요?
네.
The government is testing this telemedical service on 1,200 patients at 11 medical centers across Korea. The health ministry expects that around 8.5 million people nationwide will benefit.
Patients that are in remote regions such as islands and mountainous locations are expected to benefit the most, as well as patients with chronic diseases that require continuous monitoring other physical conditions.
Through a special transmitter device, patients send health information to their doctor on a daily basis or a few times a week, depending on their condition. The doctor assesses the data received and consults with the patient at least once a week. Only when the patient asks for an alteration in their medication or when their condition worsens will they be required to make a physical visit to the closest medical center. The pilot program, which begins this month and runs until March of next year, will be reviewed and evaluated along the way by a committee composed of medical and IT experts. Kim Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Well, we're already into day 5 of the Asian Games in Incheon. A lot of athletes are surprising us and delighting us by winning the expected goals and sometimes making some historic wins in the Asian Games.
That's right. And let's go over to our Chung Ji-sun at the News Center for the highlights. So Ji-sun, you were saying that it was quite a day on the shooting range for Team Korea.
You're right, Hyung-yeon. Korea's female shooters to start off, they grabbed a team gold and an individual bronze in the women's 50-meter rifle thrown event just today. The trio of Na Young-young, Eun-bin-na, and Chung Mi-ra put together 8,855.5 points to take the gold, with just 1.4 points separating them and runner-up China. 23-year-old Eun won a bronze medal of her own in the individual round. Eun is currently playing for the Korean Army team as she volunteered for the military duty. And on the men's side, another shooter grabbed 2 medals in the 25-meter rapid-fire pistol. This time, 24-year-old Kim Jun-hong edged China's Zhang Jian by 1 point in the individual event to win 2 golds in just one day, just hours after his team conquered the team event. He also volunteered to play for the Army team and was recently discharged. And over on the piste, Korean fencers have landed in the final of women's team foil after easily beating Japan 45-29. Korea will face off against China, who beat Hong Kong 45-21 in the semis in the morning. Korea's women fencers have won this event in 4 consecutive Asian Games dating back to the 1998 Bangkok Games. Among the 4 fencers taking part in Incheon 2014, ace Nam Hyun-hee has earned gold medals in the past 3 Asian Games in the team event, and Chun Hee-suk is seeking a second gold in Incheon after winning the individual event. The final team match against China just started at 6 p.m. this evening.
Chisel, now let's talk about baseball. I think a lot of Korean fans expect gold. The gold medal has Team Korea written all over it. The preliminary round is set to start tonight. Team Korea scheduled to play Chinese Taipei.
Right, one of the most anticipated game, and early in the day there was a chance the game might be called even before the first pitch of the game, with the Korean peninsula receiving very heavy rain from Typhoon Hwang. But as the weather cleared up in the host city in the afternoon, all games are set to start as scheduled. Now, this game against Chinese Taipei is crucial as Team Korea hopes to defend its title from Guangzhou 2010. But Chinese Taipei is one of Asia's stronger teams because they won the gold at the 2006 Asian Games and were runners-up from 4 years ago behind Team Korea. Now, Kia Tigers pitcher Yang Hyun-jo will be taking the mound tonight against Chinese Taipei's Wang Yao-lin, who plays in the Chicago Cubs organization. In the game held earlier this Wednesday, Thailand beat Hong Kong 13-7 in the Group B preliminary, but both teams are most likely going to be packing home because they have lost 2 games already.
All right, so the game will perhaps start in about 10 minutes, literally, so we will probably be watching the game after the newscast. But thank you very much, Ji-sun, for the updates. That was our Song Ji-sun at the News Center. And as we were saying, it was raining a lot in Seoul earlier in the day, but the skies have cleared up in the evening.
That's right. Let's turn to our Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for details. Michelle?
Good evening, guys. Like you said, the rain has stopped here in the capital and its surrounding regions, but there are still parts of the country seeing rain at this hour. And a heavy rain advisory is in effect in Gyeongsangnam-do province, where it's coming down at a rate of 30 millimeters per hour. A total of 80 more millimeters is expected to fall, and meanwhile, between 5 to 30 are forecast in other regions until tonight. And the rain will clear out by tomorrow, making way for a partly cloudy day. Temperatures are expected to rise back up again, ranging in the low to high 20s. Now over in Incheon, the host city of the Asian Games, a dry, sunny day is in the forecast with a high of 25 degrees. That is higher compared to today, but due to the breeze, it should feel quite cool. Now going over to our temperature readings for tomorrow. Seoul will start off the morning at 16 before reaching up to 27 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan is peaking up to 27 and 26 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island drops down to 25, while Dokdo is drops down to 21 as well, while Mount Kumgang stays the same. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you guys.
Thank you for that, Michelle. That's all we have for you at this hour. Thank you for staying with us. If you're watching from different time zones, do have a wonderful day. This has been Daniel Tran.
And I'm Na Hyun-kyung. To our viewers in Korea, have a great rest of the evening. Daniel and I will be back same time tomorrow.